Howdy, welcome to our peer panel, the test prep peer panel. Sorry, we were having some technical difficulties. Um, so before we get started, I was hoping we could introduce ourselves and introduce the panelists that will be talking today. Um, so we have a set of slides for each panelist where they can give a little introduction for themselves. So I guess I'll start to kind of break the ice. My name is Warren Perry. I'll be the moderator for this test prep peer panel, and I am a sophomore physics major, and I am from Santo, Texas. So let me see if I can get the slides to work. All right, and oops, I'm so sorry, I forgot about this slide. So the people that will be hosting this peer panel are the academic peer mentors, and we live in the residence halls and the apartments and help residents succeed academically. And what we do is some of the services that we offer are academic checkups, walk-ins, and we hold office hours for people to swing by if they'd like. But I think we'll have more information at the end of the presentation if you'd like to follow up with us. So the very first person we have is Emma. Emma, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Emma. I am a political science major. I'm from Prosper, Texas. I'm class of 22, but I'm graduating a year early, so I'm actually graduating this May. So, yep.
Wow, thank you. All right, so next we have Samuel.
Howdy, I am a junior chemical engineering major. I am from Allen, Texas, and that's all I can think of to give.
Okay, thank you very much, Samuel. And next we have Max.
Howdy, my name is Max. I'm currently an economics major, and I am class of 23.
Okay, thank you very much, Max. And next we have Ida.
Hi, everybody. My name's Ida. I'm also a chemical engineer, and I'm also a junior, just like Samuel. I'm from Katy, Texas. Woo! And I love cats. Yep, there you go. There's a fun fact.
Me too. Thank you. So next we have Lauren.
Yes, hi, I'm Lauren Harris. I'm an education major. I'm a sophomore. I'm from Boerne, Texas.
Okay, thank you very much. And so we're going to start off with our first question. Everybody can kind of just speak whenever they'd like. And our first question is, what study strategies do you use when preparing for an exam? And how does this differ between subjects?
I guess I'll just start. So my main study strategy is I just read over my notes and whatever class materials that have been provided, and then I create flashcards for different terms, or if it's something more application based like math or higher end classes, then I'll do practice problems that the teacher has suggested, or I'll reach out and go to third-party sources. But usually doing extra practice problems is what works well for me.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great answer.
I'll go ahead and speak next. I suppose broadly speaking, you're probably going to have two types of classes. Some are going to be as some of those exams are going to include essays or be primarily essays and short answer. And then some of them are going to be primarily problem solving and math and science based. Obviously, there are going to be things that don't fall into those two neat categories, but and I'm mainly going to be able to speak to the problem solving and mathematics problems. But if you have been paying attention in class, then you have probably gained enough conceptual information and a good enough conceptual understanding to where you just need to work through as many problems as you can in order to solidify the procedure with which to solve the problem, make the connections between the concepts that you've learned and each individual step in the procedure to solving a specific type of problem. This will also acquaint you with the terminology. And so it's a good alternative to flashcards. If it's a problem-heavy course, then the problems will hopefully acquaint you with all the terminology so you don't get tripped up on an exam. And then it will also highlight conceptual issues that you're having that you can bring to the professor. So in my view, the most valuable thing is going to be homework, because your homework problems are probably going to be more difficult than your exam problems. And then after you've finished all the homework and reviewed all the homework, then you should go to any practice exams that your teacher has put up.
Oh yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I always have thought of doing practice problems as like developing an algorithm in your head.
So I'm in a language study. I don't know if that applies to anyone here, but a lot of liberal arts majors have to take a language. And so study for a language looks very different than study for most other classes. But things that I have found helpful are trying to find native speakers and just practicing conversation with them. I think that's probably the best way to help study if you are taking a language class, as well as repetition. And I think that goes with any test really, is that the more repetition, the more it becomes solidified in your mind and like the easier it is to reproduce on a test. But I think that is especially true for language study.
All right, thank you very much. Did anybody else want to chime in before we moved on? All right, well, those are very great answers. I'll go ahead and move on to question number 2. So, what is your exam study schedule?
I can answer this one. So usually I will start studying like about, depending on how difficult my classes are. So because I'm a junior and this is like technically my hardest year, I start studying for my exams like literally a week before, and I will kind of just break up the material day by day. And so maybe like the first day I'll study unit 1, and then like the second day I'll study unit 2, and so on. And I like to get to a point where the day before the exam, I'm not relearning material, I'm just reviewing everything. So that way I feel like a lot less stressed about it. But this is my study schedule is something that like has taken me 3 years of college to like finally master, because like for every class I've taken, you kind of have to study differently. So maybe studying a week before one class is not feasible, but that's kind of what I do. You just kind of have to prepare in advance.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the advice we always give is to at least give yourself 4 days of study time.
I think this also applies for homework problems. If you give yourself enough time to deal with the problems on the exam, or sorry, in homework, then you'll have time to think about it and move carefully to where you catch any of your mistakes. And every mistake that you make in a homework, you can learn from. Whereas if you are if it's crunch time on a homework assignment, then you're not going to be learning as much. You're just cramming, and you're trying to get all the right answers in before it's due. So by doing that, if you come up on a problem on a homework 3 days before it's due and you're stumped, then you can think about it during that extra time. And sort of like what Ada said, I think this allows for a continuity of studying to where you are going over the material in your head and you're reviewing practice problems basically continuously over the course. And then it's not so much studying for the exam as it is mastering the material.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, my schedule, my biggest piece of advice for your study schedule is kind of what Samuel and Ada have said, which is to kind of space it out and avoid cramming as much as possible. Because in my personal experience, cramming is very stressful and usually not effective at all, and you're just causing unnecessary stress to yourself. So I would definitely start at least 4 days in advance.
Yeah, for sure. It's always better to kind of sleep on that information. All right, well, if we didn't have anybody else who wanted to chime in, I'll go ahead and move on to question number 3. So, do you prefer to study in a group or by yourself? And how do you organize an effective study session?
I can go. I think that I prefer both in a way, but if I'm going into a study group, I have to have individual studying before that time so that my head's in the right place to know what I do and don't need help on. And then how you like organize an effective study session, I would say like come with the expectation of what you're going to talk about, just so you don't get sidetracked, but also come with questions. And that also comes with like you studying by yourself before you study with a group. So, yeah.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you.
I just want to say I completely agree with Lauren. And if there's one thing I'd emphasize about that, it would be trying to go to that study session with specific, very specific questions. Perhaps even if you think you know the answer, it's still worth asking some of those questions. Personally, I really enjoy talking with people. I really enjoy that interaction, especially in a time whenever I'm starved for that interaction. And so I do not actually study particularly well in a group because I will get sidetracked.
Yeah, me too.
I think like kind of in that same train of thought, sometimes like the people that I study with, they won't necessarily be studying for the same test that I am. Like we're all studying independently, but together. And in those situations, it is really difficult to like stay on track and not get distracted. But at the same time, I really value those times because sometimes if I'm just working like in my house by myself, I am not easily like able to focus or I get distracted with things in my home. And so study sessions with people provides a layer of accountability where they can help me like stay focused, but I also have to be disciplined, like put in earbuds or something like that so I don't get distracted with like side conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, well, if that's all the answers we had, I'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So, how do you overcome studying and preparing for a difficult class?
Okay, I'll start this one off. So, especially this semester, I'm in thermodynamics 2, which is like killing me. And basically, how I've overcome kind of studying and preparing for it is I talk to the professor and I talk to the TA like almost constantly, like on a weekly basis. And I come with a lot of questions. We talk about homework. And even then, like just having that like face-to-face interaction with the professor, they're going to get to know you, they're going to know your name, and then that usually works out for you in the end better. That if they're like, oh, you know, she needs blah 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 grade and she's almost there, maybe I'll just like help curve her a little bit more. Because for instance, freshman year I was in Cal 3 and I failed every single one of those exams. Like that was for some reason such a difficult class for me. But I had gone to the professor every office hour she had. I literally was sitting right next to her trying to learn and trying to do my best. And I came out with a B in that class. So face-to-face interaction with the professor can kind of get you far. Like don't just like discredit it because you never know what a prof may have up their sleeve and it could be helpful for you in the end.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, going to office hours, you might get information that you might not get in class, which is nice.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the biggest piece of advice is don't be scared to ask for help. And, kind of like Ada said, communicating with the TAs and professors often is really, really helpful.
Yeah, thank you. All right, these are really great answers. Thank you, guys. I'll go ahead and move on to what? Oops. Can you come here and help me? Oh, sorry. Did you guys hear the question? Okay. So, how has COVID-19 affected the way that you prepare for and take exams?
I'll start this one off again just because my roommate got COVID and I was quarantined in my house for like the last 2 weeks. So I've seen it at like the actual extreme besides just like staying home, that order we had back in March. And I can tell you that it's made it easier and harder to study because it's easier because you're kind of like, I've been stuck at home doing literally nothing but school. So I have so much time, but it's made it harder because I've had so much time that I'm like, oh, I can get to that later, blah, blah, blah. And the way I've really overcome that is just, I have a planner and I set like kind of to-do list and daily goals for myself that I want to accomplish. And then I also kind of have like the impending fear that like if I don't finish what I need to get finished, that I'm gonna get behind. And getting behind is like one of the worst things you can honestly do sometimes when it comes to preparing for an exam, because I feel like the more like it could make like that hour that you spend doing whatever else when you could have been studying can like make or I feel like can sometimes make or break whether you understand a concept. So it's been rough, but we're trying our best, and that's all you can do.
Yeah, that time is really crucial. Thank you very much.
Speaking of being stuck in a particular place, it is essential that in that place that you could be stuck in, it's very good to travel to an external location if you can, and then just being out in public and having other people around you acts as accountability to make sure you're studying rather than goofing off or doing something else. But in the extreme situation that Ada talked about, and you are stuck in a particular place, you should be prepared to have a desk or have a space. Have last week it was not last week, but last session it was somebody who just had a place on their floor where they sat down to do their work. The key thing is to make sure it's designated specifically for work, and you might even try to have multiple places if you can. And if you're in your bed and you're studying, you're gonna fall asleep before you finish even one practice problem. That's almost certain. So don't do that.
Yeah, for sure. You kind of have to trick your brain into what mode it needs to be in. Did anybody
think-
else? Sorry.
No, you're good. I think one way that Corona has like negatively affected the way I prepare for exams that I haven't quite found a way to overcome yet is it's much more difficult to like meet classmates, like make friends in your classes, and then like form study groups based like off of those people that you meet. Um, it's hard to like foster those relationships over Zoom. But like I have noticed that people are more active on like class group meets and things like that. And I don't know, like even having the boldness to like DM someone on that group meet and be like, hey, I'm struggling too. Like let's struggle together, even though it's like not as easy as like a face-to-face interaction with someone you're sitting next to in class. It's still been a good way to like overcome the separation that like Corona has forced to happen.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you so much. So did anybody else want to chime in before I moved on? All right, I'll go ahead to question 6. How do you prepare for difficulties during an exam, such as test anxiety or time limits?
This is actually, this is probably something I'm going to say that is very, very bad advice, but has proven true for me in the past in particular circumstances. A surprising number of times, which is why I'm bringing it up. Sometimes the best time to learn a concept completely and have your understanding about a question click is during the exam. There have been times whenever it's like, I feel like I didn't study enough. I feel like I am unprepared for this exam. I sit down, I see a question I don't quite know how to tackle, and I start writing. I don't try to start calculating anything. I don't. I start writing to try and understand the problem on the exam, and sometimes that will make the concept click in my head. It's difficult to do this if you don't come into the exam with a mindset that says, I want to tackle each individual problem the best I can. Some exams are built differently, and if you like a 60 problem multiple choice exam, you should seek out the easiest problems. Or if it's 8 questions but they're all multiple steps, you should try and find the one that you feel the most comfortable with. And then once you're done with that one, you can move on to one that you were less sure how to deal with and try to tackle it more in depth by writing out your strategy and writing out the concepts that you think you'll need and how you'll need to apply them. And honestly, if you go into the exam with a bit of apathy towards your grade and are more concerned with the concepts, this will be easier to apply. How to cultivate that apathy? In my case, it has been a lifetime of training, but
Yeah, definitely. One thing I learned from a mentor was if you don't immediately know the answer, at least write down what you know, because even then you can get partial credit and eventually it'll probably click.
Kind of going off of that a little bit, I think one of my main objectives when I'm kind of stressed out over a difficult test I know is coming up is to make sure I have like a decent attitude going into the test. Because if I have an attitude of, oh, I really don't want to be here, I want to get this over with as quickly as possible, I won't always try my hardest, and I won't always, in my brain, sometimes won't be working at 100% because I'm just trying to get the test over with as quickly as possible. And I would have accepted defeat at that point, if that makes sense. So for me personally, I just try to have like a decent decent attitude going into the test. And yeah.
Yeah, different people have different strategies, for sure.
you said something which is very, very true. If you go into the exam sleep deprived, for example, your goal is not going to be to answer the questions correctly or even to get all the points. It's probably just going to be to get the questions done and go home and sleep. So try your best not to go into an exam sleep deprived.
So something that I really like doing before exams is kind of taking like, I don't know, like a sheet of paper and writing down everything that you feel confident about during that test, like all the topics that you like know that you got, and then kind of like remind yourself that you understand those problems, and so that way you're able to focus, like Sam said, like focus on the ones that you don't understand and kind of narrow those down. And then if they have like time limits and they've given you a set of problems, you could like set a timer and see how many, like if it's a math class, see how many problems that you can solve in that time limit and kind of prepare yourself for that. So.
Yeah, excellent answer. Thank you so much. All right, well, if nobody else wanted to chime in, we can go ahead and move on to the next one. We got very excellent answers on this one. Thank you. So for question number 7, what do you do when your previous study strategy doesn't work?
I can start this one off. So I know I had literally my intro to chemical engineering. I had I was studying for a test one way and it did not work. I bombed the exam, and I realized that it seemed like the only way I could study was the way I had been studying, which is to do practice problems, but that wasn't working, obviously, because I had done terrible on the exam. So what I do is I usually go to the professor and I'm like, hey, listen, this is how I decided to approach your exam. This is how I studied. What do you think I can do better to prepare? Because at the end of the day, it's the profs who make the exam, so they probably know the best way to study. So my professor was like, while doing practice problems is great to understand the concepts, reading the textbook is like what I recommend mostly. And he had never really said that in class whatsoever. So it took me actually going to his office hours and talking to him about it to like realize that that's what I actually, like that was the best way to like, study for the exam.
Yeah, being open to feedback definitely helps.
Also, in line with what Ida said, um, you may not have necessarily studied for this exam incorrectly. It could have just been the concepts, and so it is good to go to the professor and discuss the particular concepts in addition to your study strategy. And you might discover that these concepts just went above your head this time, and now that you've discussed them with the professor, you understand them better. So you're prepared to apply these concepts on the next exam if they are going to come up again, or on the final if the final is cumulative. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Did anybody want to say something about this last problem before we moved on? All right, so moving on to question number 8. How do you balance preparing for multiple exams at once?
I can start this one. I think this is a really important question, especially like for those of us who have jobs as well. Life just gets super busy, super fast, and things pile on, and it feels overwhelming, especially when there are a lot of like deadlines all at the same time. One thing that has really like changed my study habits is rising early, like just starting your day early, like getting up early in the morning and being productive in those early hours can do a lot to like take things off of your plate like early in the morning, so the load feels much less and it's not all waiting for you late at night. That just like helps my anxiety level and it just makes the day easier.
Yeah, I definitely need to follow that advice.
Okay, so kind of going off of what Emma said, I literally had 3 exams like back to back last week on top, because I do research as well, so it's like another job on top of that. And like Emma has said, I got up early, and basically getting up early and it's kind of getting up early and planning out like every single minute of your day. I know it seems like too much. It's like it seems stressful when you're like looking at it, but when you take like a step back, for example, okay, hold on. Sorry, everybody, I'm struggling a little bit right now. Anyway, what I mean by that is, it was, I think 2 weeks ago, I took a step back and was like, okay, I have 3 exams coming up. I have deadlines for my research. I need to get on a good sleeping schedule, and I need to plan every single minute out of my day. And basically, when you do that, you can plan exactly when you'll study, when you'll do practice problems, when you'll go to work, when you'll do all of this. And in that week that I had those 3 exams and I was trying to balance a lot, it kind of felt like I was overwhelmed. But every time I took a step back and I looked at my planner, I was like, okay, wait, but now I can study for my analysis test now, whatever. It allowed me to really honestly, truly stay on top of everything and make sure that I studied well enough for everything and that everything got done. But also getting on a good sleeping schedule is very, very important. I know we're in college and like that is not what a lot of college kids do, but your brain cannot function without sleep. And if you want to be able to do well in your exams, and especially when you have multiple exams, sleep. So yeah, so basically sleep. I'm so sorry. Oh god.
Yeah, excellent input. Thank you.
I don't think that this point could be emphasized enough. So thank you, Ida. Do not overestimate yourself physiologically. Uh, your mind and your body are connected. You are not going to cheat your own body system. It will get the better of you, whether it's on the first exam or the second exam, or in the case 3 exams in a week, it'll definitely get you by the 3rd exam. As far as preparing for multiple exams at once, the reality is that you probably don't have time to rewatch the lectures or read through every word of the textbook. You probably don't have that time, especially if you want to maintain a good sleep schedule. And so the more valuable thing is to outline the information which is going to be on the exam. So this is unit 1, this is unit 2, this is unit maybe 4 if they skipped a unit. And once you outline that, you'll be able to focus your attention in that outline specifically, and you'll be able to establish a continuity of thought. So if you start a problem from unit 3, because that was the unit that you were really struggling with, and you think on it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes without, then you can say, you know what, I'm stuck on this problem. I'm going to keep thinking on it, but I can switch to studying for another exam. So being able to switch tasks is helpful if and only if you have an outline prepared, which tells you, which is a roadmap for each of your individual exams, and you can kind of switch between each of your roadmaps.
Yeah, very, very well worded. Thank you very
Oh,
much.
and Ida mentioned having a schedule. That is definitely a great idea and definitely works. I have a very, very bad sense of time, and sometimes I'll just need to lose myself in a concept in a textbook for a few hours, or in a problem even. And so instead of having a time-based outline, having a concept-based outline may work better for an individual.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right.
Sorry. Something that kind of goes with all of what y'all said is having a schedule, but also something that really helps is to get the thing that you don't want to do done first. That way you can kind of just rip the band-aid off, like get whatever you don't want to do that day done, and then you can focus and enjoy like the other things that you have to do. For me, as an education major, doing a bunch of projects, not necessarily exams. There's some exams, but most of it is like presentations and projects. I normally just get the one that I don't want to do done first. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, getting that weight off your shoulders definitely helps you focus for the rest of the week.
As a mentor, I had in high school said, swallow the big frog first.
All right, did anybody want to touch on this subject again before we move on? Okay, so moving on to question 9. What communication do you have with your professor before and after an exam?
I can start this off because talking to my profs is my favorite thing to do. So before an exam, if it's depending on whether it's the first, like let's say this is the first exam, I will kind of explain, hey, I'm studying like this. Do you think this is a good way to study? I'm doing practice problems. What in terms of like, is it going to be more like math based, especially in like engineering? I feel like you either have like a concept based test, or you have a test that's mostly like working out problems. And so that's a question I always like to ask, like, is this going to be more concept based or is it going to be more math based? Because from then I can kind of figure out where I want to use like my study time. So like I may not understand the concept, but I can replicate this math pretty well. So, you know, if it's more math based, I don't necessarily want to like waste my time trying to figure this concept out when in the end it won't like really matter, which I mean, it should matter. Learn everything in your degree, but like, you know what I mean? For the exam, sometimes you just don't have the time in the day, you know? And then after an exam, I always like to get started on the next homework or the next concept and go to the next office hour, because you'll actually be really surprised. Like it's like there's almost always nobody there, but if you can put that first foot forward and kind of show the professor like, okay, I know we just had an exam, but like I'm ready to move on, I'm ready for the next thing, it kind of makes a really good impression, and it makes the professor like you more, because it shows that like you care about what you're learning and you care about your grade in that class, which is what a lot of profs want to see in students. And then if it's like the second exam, and let's say you didn't do so well on like first exam, you can always go back and be like, hey, can we go through the first exam, and can you kind of tell me where I was missing or what I was missing conceptually, and how you recommend I study for the second exam. Because in OChem, which I don't know if anyone's taken OChem, that was the bane of my existence for a year. I had done pretty well up until the very last exam, and I was making like 80s, low 80s, high 70s, I was on track to get a B. And then at that point on that last exam, I somehow pulled a 38. I don't know how I did that. I walked out of that exam truly thinking like I had done pretty okay, like I didn't feel the best about it. And then I see my 38 in the grade book, and I was just like, well, that's concerning to say the least. So I talked to the professor, and I was like, listen, I still want to be in your class. Is there anything I can do to try to still get a B? And he was very honest with me, and he was like, no. He's like, at this point, you should be more worried about passing the class. And I was like, okay, fair. So we kind of talked about like a good study plan. Where the final was mostly focused on, it was cumulative, but it was mostly focused on concepts that we had learned after the third exam. So he was like, here's how I recommend you go over all the previous material. Here's how I recommend you go through like the current material. And we kind of also talked about like curves, what that was going to look like, and what I needed on the final with the curve and without the curve, depending on whether or not he decided to apply it to pass the class. And so basically what I'm saying is communicating as much as you can with your professor will really get you like far in a class. And not only will you like hear things that weren't said in class, but you may also, your professor, at the end of the day, your professor's there to help you. So they're going to be more willing to help you if it shows that you're putting the first foot forward and you actually care. And so if you're going to those office hours and you're talking about what you can do to improve your grade, that's truly the best thing you can do. So talk to them all the time, every day. That's what. Okay.
Yeah, very, very well articulated. Thank you so much.
That's pretty much what I was gonna say. But like at the very least, it's way better to ask for help ahead of time than at the last second, when the professor also has half the class asking for help also at the last second, and they'll probably be way overwhelmed to actually give any super meaningful advice. So definitely try to at least communicate early on with your professor, or TAs at the very least.
Yeah.
I have 3 things to say about this, and I'll probably forget one of them. The first is so let's say you get your exam back, and you go over your grade, and you see the grade. Before you go to your professor and ask him to explain your grade, go through the exam and see if you can explain your grade to yourself. And then you'll find it's like, oh, this was a dumb mistake. This was a concept I didn't understand at the time, but now I get a little bit better. And then this is a concept which I still don't understand. I don't know why I got this problem wrong. And so this is something I really need to clarify with my professor before I go to the next exam. So do that work ahead of time. I think your professor will appreciate it. Secondly, in this time of Zoom, the hours, the half of the day, so the 12 hours before the exam actually starts, your professor is probably going to be dealing with a lot of logistics questions, like, is the Zoom link working? Am I going to have recordings of everybody? Is everybody's webcam working? Does everybody have access to the exam, et cetera, et cetera. So they aren't going to have time for conceptual problems. So do not delay in asking those conceptual problems, and definitely don't put them off, like Max said. And then thirdly, this applies to, in my opinion, to all studying, and it's definitely something that you can bring to your professors, is try to develop an appreciation and an understanding of where the information you're studying comes from, and why somebody saw fit to seek out that information in the first place. Because if you can understand those two things, you're well on your way to understanding the concept basically in its entirety. And the reason I say this is applicable when talking to your professor is because a lot of the engineering professors especially, but pretty much all your professors are going to have really relevant experience in the fields that they're teaching in. And so whenever you are asking them, if you can formulate these questions correctly, they'll be able to point you to historical moments or experimental reasons or engineering practical reasons why things are the way they are, especially with regards to these concepts, and you'll overcome those conceptual hurdles, and that'll be major progress.
Yeah, I've also found that figuring out that big picture or figuring out the point to all this really helps with being motivated in your study. Yeah, thank you. Excellent answer.
Kind of adding on, I think, to the first point that Samuel made, just about like going over your exam and seeing what mistakes were made. I have found that professors really appreciate it when you don't make excuses and you own up like when you made a mistake. And this doesn't always have to do with exams. Just like if you missed a homework or if you accidentally like didn't go to class or something, rather than like making up an excuse or trying to justify or whatever, I have found that my professors like value honesty in like those areas. And if I just say like, like, I'm really sorry, like this was my fault, like I made a mistake, like I just forgot, or like something like that, rather than trying to like make it sound less bad, because professors can like see through those excuses and it makes them like less inclined to help you. And then another like point I wanted to make just about communication with professors in general, not necessarily having to do with exams specifically, but it's important to have like a good relationship with your professor, because I'm sorry if it's kind of loud in here, I'm really sorry, but just about like having a good relationship with them, because they could write you like a letter of recommendation in the future. And so it's really important that they know your face and they know who you are. Something that I've found really cool to do is if there's a specific topic or unit or subject matter that really appeals to you, that really like piques your interest, like emailing my professor and saying like, hey, like I really enjoy learning about this. Is there any more research that you can point me to? Are there any more, is there like a paper or like a scholarly work that I could read on this? Like point me in the direction where I can learn more about this, and then have a discussion with them after you went and read it, or after you went and watched whatever they gave you, and say like, hey, like I read what you sent me, like I watched what you sent me, like this is my thoughts about it, what are your thoughts about it? And kind of facilitating a dialogue outside of the classroom shows like your initiative and your like eagerness for learning, and that could do a lot to help them write you a good letter of recommendation maybe one day, or want to curb your grade, or just something like that. So not just like, hey, like let's talk about the exam, but having like a more well-rounded like communication with a professor, I think could do a lot to help you in many areas.
Definitely. What I like to do is if I really enjoyed a class, I write a really well thought out thank you email afterwards. All right, if there's no more thoughts on this question, we'll probably go ahead and move on to our final question. So, what university provided resources have you used to prepare, such as SIs or ASC tutoring?
I can start this off. I used SIs, I'm pretty sure, like for every single class I had freshman and sophomore year. And it really helps, especially freshman year, going into that first like college class. And it's one of those, I think it was like chemistry. It was like just general chemistry. That first class was so intimidating because it's college, it's the first college class. It was the first class I had on the first day of school. So like, but it was just very intimidating. But SIs especially, like they are in communication with your profs, and professors will sometimes let them, depending on the relationship, they'll let them like see the exam. And so my SI freshman year, both of my SIs freshman year for chemistry, had really great relationships with the professors. And so the professor would literally let the SI know, like, hey, this is going to be on the exam, so make sure you really emphasize it in the SI session. And they would come back and tell us, like, hey, the professor said this and this and this about the exam. And that is such valuable information that you really cannot get anywhere else. Like even going to your professor and being like, hey, is this going to be on the exam, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes they're not willing to tell you, but they are going to tell the SI. Not to mention that like they are easier. Like sometimes it's easier going to like somebody who's like your age or like a senior or whatever who's been through it than like going to a professor and being like, so I have no idea what's going on. Can you please help me? And SIs are like definitely one of those resources that I feel like a lot of students overlook, because I know for at least chemical engineering or most engineering in general, like the higher you get into your courses, they don't offer SIs. So take advantage of them while you still can, because it is SIs that have gotten me through so many classes, and they're just awesome. I love SIs. Do it, you guys. It's the best. They're the best.
Thank you. Very well said.
Something that I really enjoyed my freshman year was also SI sessions. And this year I'm in a couple of writing intensive courses. And so with those, there's I have a UPM, which is like a peer mentor for that class specifically, and she's the one that grades the essays or like the reading responses, like everything that we're doing that involves writing. She's the one that's looking at all of that individually for us. And she has conferences set up. They are optional, but like I would this is kind of like a tangent, but even if you don't feel like you need those, even if you don't feel like you need to go to SI or you need to have like a one-on-one with like a peer mentor, just do it anyways. That way you have like a blanket of security, like I know this information for sure if someone's teaching it to me and like I got it. But like I would just strongly encourage, even if you are like feel super confident, it can't hurt to go. So
Yeah, for sure. Thank you very much.
Another thing is, even if you are in a class where you don't think you're going to be struggling with the concepts, there are times when failure to go over the concepts at least one more time, other than class, and making sure that you are on top of the homework and also any practice exams. If you fail to do that, even though you would have gotten the concepts otherwise, because you didn't put in the work, you're not going to get a good grade. You'll end up with a B or a C or lower. And so the university can provide you with an environment where people are willing to hold you accountable. And so even if an SI or ASC tutoring isn't necessary to get the concept down completely, it's still worth going to these resources for accountability's sake, and you are probably going to realize that you didn't understand the concepts as well as you thought you did.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you so much.
I also really value SIs for just kind of the communal learning environment outside of the classroom. Everyone there really is diligent with their studies and cares about their grades, and that's just like a really cool environment to study in. Fun fact, freshman year, I was really diligent about going to SI sessions for a math class, and there's a girl that I kind of knew, but I didn't know her sort of well, and we would sit next to each other during the SI sessions, and now she's my roommate, y'all. How fun is that? So SIs could get you a friend and a roommate. But anyways, SIs are great. And I don't know if any of y'all are taking languages. I know I already asked that. But something that I'm pretty sure the language department provides, or yeah, the language department, different like languages have different like things that they provide. But I know, so I'm taking Arabic, and Arabic, the staff has selected native speakers, and they can pair you off with a native speaker. And you can like have weekly conversations with them that's like facilitated through the university. So if you're taking a language, you can like email your professor and ask if they have something similar to that, and that has been amazing. That's been like really, really helpful for me. So
That's really cool. I wouldn't have thought of making social connections as a benefit to taking advantage of resources.
Yeah, SI sessions are definitely super helpful since pretty much like everyone said, um, they get, you know, maybe some insider information from the professor, or you know, everyone there is like actually trying to learn or improve. So it's a pretty good environment to be in. Um, I've only had like one or two classes with SI sessions, and they've all been pretty good. I personally haven't been to any like specialized tutoring, but I've heard good things from other people.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this is our very last question. Does anybody want to touch on it one more time before we wrap up?
I don't know if I emphasized this point clearly enough, but use ASC.
Good advice. Thank you. All right. Well, that was it for the presentation, but at the very end of our peer panel, we wanted to point everyone here to some resources, just in case they wanted more information besides what we discussed here. But I think one of the key places you could turn to is the Academic Success Center, where you can locate study hub tutors and SI sessions, and which are course specific. And you can receive handouts about studying and test taking, as well as receive academic coaching. And we also wanted to show what programs and services were available on campus. We have the community learning centers, which uh, provide a lot of resources for people that might not always have access to that. We have residential tutoring in Hullabaloo 105 and Commons 108, as well as Evans and White Creek. And in terms of academics in residence and eCampus organization, uh, it looks like you can request a presentation and attend office hours. And right before we wrapped up, we wanted to talk about the services we provide one more time. So what we do is we kind of help with the general approach to academics. And the services we provide are we allow walk-ins during our office hours, and you can attend our office hours in Hullabaloo 125 and Commons 102, and our hours of availability are down there. But if you wanted to schedule for a specific one-on-one time, you can sign up for an academic checkup. The QR code is right there, in case you wanted to go ahead and do that. And we also create and host peer panels like what we're doing right now. And we work with our A's on creating academic specific programs in buildings on campus. So outside of that, let me stop recording, but